I think we're going to become beings that we have never been before. We're going to change our state of being. There's going to be a complete metamorphosis. It isn't just going to be a gradual linear evolution for humanity. It's going to be a jump in a state of being, a total metamorphosis. So I really feel we're going to step into our light bodies in a bigger way. We're going to be less dense, literally, physically. We're probably going to eat less, more plant-based, lighter foods. We're going to be have a sense of much more telepathy, stronger healing ability. It's very beautiful, actually, and it's going to take us a few years to get there, probably 10 years, but people are going to be popping into that at various points depending on how much light they can embody.
I'd like to welcome to the show Pam Gregory. How you doing, Pam?
Yeah, top of the world. Thank you, Alex. Joy to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversations because I really haven't had anybody on the show that can go deep down the rabbit hole of astrology and kind of debunk a bunch of myths about astrology, because astrology has a pretty bad rap in the world of people who don't believe in woo woo. I mean, it is far woo woo as you can get, sometimes if done incorrectly or spoken about incorrectly, taught incorrectly. But before we jump down that rabbit hole, I wanted to ask you what got you into becoming an astrologer. I mean, it's not something that when you were 5 years old and go, you know what I want to do when I grow up.
Not at all. No, it appeared to be by chance, but of course it's never by chance, is it?
Hmm.
Straight after university, the next day after I'd finished university, I got on a plane with $100, and this is way before the time of mobile phones, emigrated to Canada. And in the first week, I joined a yoga class. And there was a big guy there from Jamaica, and yoga classes are very silent. But at the end, a couple of the girls said, he's an astrologer. So I went up to him and said, look, I know nothing about this, but I'd love you to do my chart. And the next weekend, I went round to his tiny apartment in Toronto. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I spent 7 hours with him. And it just
Wow.
blew my world open. And I haven't stopped studying since then. It just cracked my world open that he could, go back in my life, give me dates of particular experiences, etc. And it was just like magic. And
So
oddly, he disappeared soon after that. I think he was just an earth angel that came to reconnect me to it.
really, that's fascinating. Well, so during those 7 hours, I mean, you were a believer in astrology before you did those 7 hours with this guy?
I knew nothing about it, but it's interesting you say believer,
Right.
because people think you've got to believe that it's some kind of religion or philosophy in that way. It's just a language. It's literally a language. So it's just like learning French or Spanish or whatever. But you'd never say you don't believe in French, do you?
Hmm.
Or, you don't believe in that codswallop called Spanish, do you?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's literally just a language that you learn with rules like grammar, etc. And it's for me, it's having spoken pretty fluent French. It's much more complicated than learning a language, because with the language you finally get to the point, as I did with French, thinking, okay, I've pretty much cracked it. I can be colloquial, I can speak with a local, I can talk about anything. Haven't got that clunky thing in my head anymore that's trying, this means that. And so you get to a finite point with a language of saying, right, I can now speak this language. You never get to that point with astrology. I'm still a learner all these years on. I'm still a beginner. It just is infinite. It goes on and on and on, partly because of the discovery of new planets further out in the cosmos. But it's also because we are able to I think, really dig much deeper into the true meaning of astrology. And so whether you go out or whether you go in,
Hmm.
it's never an ending. It's infinite.
Where did astrology come from? What are the origins of astrology?
Well, that's a fascinating question. It is said in recorded history, it is said that it began about 6,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, which was the birth of civilization, of writing and arithmetic. And that sadly is now modern day Iraq. But that's when people were living very open to the skies. They didn't have computers and televisions and cinema. Their entertainment was watching the moon move around and Venus and Mars. And so they started to tell each other stories about the gods that lived on the planets. And those stories are the myths that are still my bread and butter today. I mean, I find it astonishing that the myths that were invented as stories for entertainment are absolutely what I use in my day-to-day practice. I actually think it is way older than 6,000 years, because Robert Edward Grant is a great friend of yours. If you look at the work he was doing in the pyramids with the zodiacs, if those pyramids were built 13,000 years ago, or maybe even a whole precessional cycle earlier than that, you add another 25,000 years back on that. If that had the language of the zodiac signs written inside the king's chamber, then we're dealing with something really, really ancient as a galactic language. I think it came from the Galactics.
So so for the layman, what is astrology? Because I'll tell you what I think it is, and I'm sure I'm going to be completely off. But it is basically, from my understanding, the movement of the stars, and depending on where the stars or planets align, certain things happen energetically to this planet, just like the moon moving around the earth affects the tides. We have that kind of effect on our energy level, depending on when we were born. There's a certain energy signal. I think so. You see, it's very muddled what I just said. Please fix this for me. I set you up, Pam. I set you up. I wanted to completely look like a buffoon, so you look even better. So please.
Oh, bless you. Bless you. Okay, so what your birth chart is really completely unique. It will never be repeated in history again, which means we're all special. Mm-hmm. And what it is a snapshot of the heavens at the moment of your birth, which is like the Hermetic philosophy. It's an out there because it's a snapshot of the heavens, but it also gives me a very detailed map of your psyche. So it's inner and outer at the same time. So what you're looking at really is what are called the archetypes, the myths around the planets, and their geometry to each other. And so the archetypes of the planets give me specific meanings. Their specific geometry to each other give me specific meanings. The positions they fall in the clock face of the birth chart, are they at the beginning, the middle, the end, where are they? That gives me another layer of meaning. So you've got this kind of multi-layered jigsaw building up that gives me just layers and layers and layers and layers of meaning for that person. And so what astrology does is connect us to the cosmos via a language of meaning and sacred geometry, essentially. So it's very deep. And I'm discovering things in my own birth chart all these years on. I think, wow, how didn't I see that? So it is very, very multi-layered. So even, I don't do client work anymore, sadly, I just don't have the time. But when I used to see clients, all I'd know was their name, and they could have called themselves Fred, that didn't matter. But as long as I had the accurate birth data, I could go back in their life, which I always did with a client, and select maybe 20 or 30 specific dates where I could ask a question that had a black and white answer. Did a parent die at that time? Did you emigrate? Was there a sibling born who was very unwell at that time? Did your mother become very ill at that time? So all of those questions kind of had yes or no answers. You couldn't say, well, my father kind of died then, and I kind of emigrated. Do you know what I mean? It's got black and white answers. So that would confirm the birth time for me. And that means if in going back, I could pinpoint exact dates, usually by the month, not necessarily by the day, but by the month. I could therefore reliably move forwards in their life and describe the qualities of experience. I never describe the events because the universe is way smarter than we are in co-creating with us, but I could describe particular qualities of events or opportunities, strategic opportunities coming up for them, which then they could optimize, they could maximize. And so But if, for instance, I was with a client going back in their life and saying, did this happen at this date, this happened, and they'd say all of those things happened, but they happened 6 months earlier than those dates you're giving me, I know the person was born, let's say, about 10 minutes earlier. So I can rectify the time, I can change the clock face on the birth chart, then everything going backwards and forwards works like clockwork. So it's very precise.
How did you know what questions to ask? Where does that information come from?
Okay, so the questions, so they come from the they come from the archetypes of the planets, because I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, because I know some of the audience may not be familiar with astrology. But let's say you had a big Pluto transit to the vertical axis in your chart. You've got two axes in your chart, like cross wires. And so the vertical axis, one of the meanings is the parental axis, the family axis. So if, for instance, you have a big Pluto transit, and Pluto has a 248-year orbit, so those don't come up very often in your chart, that is one of the classic signatures of the death, because Pluto is to do with death, transformation and rebirth, the death of a parent or grandparent. Very reliable. Transit solar arcs, very reliable. Equally with, if it's, say, a Neptune transit to that vertical axis, that parental axis, I'd say, did a parent or grandparent become extremely frail at that time and just kind of faded away? And you get the answer. So it's it used to, it still blows me away all the time how reliable and accurate it is. And this is literally the first time I've met someone or spoken to them on Zoom, and they might have called themselves Fred, as I say. It is remarkably, remarkably accurate. And so it gives us a stunning sense of validation of our uniqueness in the world, who we are, and who we are meant to become in our Dharma. What is our Dharma? What is our unique soul's purpose in this lifetime? And that is, that's often what people search for all their lives. And it's so clearly marked in the chart in terms of the direction that their soul needs to go in to be fulfilled in this life. It's like a compass needle. And I can say more on that if you'd like me to.
Yes, absolutely. Before we move forward, I want to go back. So if let's say I show up, I'm meeting you for the first time, all right? I don't see a whole lot of books around you. I don't see any charts around you. I do see some beautiful pillows that have some astrology in it. But so if I show up and give you a birthday and I'm talking to you,
and
how
a time.
do you, and a time when you were born?
Your time when you were born, and a place, like a town.
A town. Okay. So if I gave you that information, then you would, based on just, because that's a lot of variables between let's say the last 50 or 100 years, a lot of dates and times during that period. How are you going to, is it something that comes instinctually to you? Are you using astrology in a combination of some other skill set or
No.
Explain.
No, again,
I'm really curious. I just want to know how the process works.
when I was studying a long time ago, we had to calculate the charts manually with logarithmic tables of planetary movements. We weren't allowed to use a calculator. That took hours to do. Now, computers can calculate the actual chart. So all I need is the date, a time, and a place. That's all I need. And as I said, they could make up the name. That's the only three things I need. The computer can calculate the chart in a few minutes. And I asked for various kind of slices of information, if you like, levels of information. I then spend about 5 hours analyzing all of that information. And the real skill with astrology is not that means this. It's the synthesis. It's almost like, when you're learning a language or when you're learning music, it's really clunky when you start. But once you can really flow with it, you can start to read it like music, much more intuitively. So even now, if I was doing a special favor for somebody, because as I said, I haven't got time to do client work, it would take me literally 4 to 5 hours before I would have the conversation with the client, and then I'd have a lot of information for them.
Fascinating. So, Pam, when you were studying this, the world we live in now, it's a little bit more open to a lot of the things that we're talking about on this show. channeling, psychic mediums. It's always been around, but they're a little bit more open to it nowadays than they were before. People are more curious about it. Yeah, 20 years ago, if you would have told me I was going to have a conversation with an astrologer in England, I would have said you're absolutely insane. But I'm here now because this is where I am in my journey. When you came out as a professional astrologer, what did your friends and family say about around you? Because this is not an easy path to walk when you started.
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, I think you're spot on, Alice, because like any spiritual path, it's pretty solo. It's pretty solo. I worked in the corporate world for 35 years. So I was pretty
Oh,
senior. I was director in the corporate world. I could not mention this subject because it would wipe out any business credibility I had. Because in one sense, it's very interesting. That's why I called my first book, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? Because, I'd operate in the corporate world, pretty successfully. And so, but if any of my clients, my big corporate clients, heard that I was also an astrologer, at the end of meetings, they'd kind of take me off to a corner and in a kind of conspiratorial whisper, they'd say, come on now, you can tell me you don't really believe in astrology, do you? Like I'd gone from a competent person to somebody utterly wacko who clearly needed therapy. So that became such an impossible Grand Canyon to navigate. And many of us do this, don't we? We do the no-brainer as our first career, and then we move on and say, no, this is the thing I've really got to do. And I know in previous lifetimes I know I've absolutely worked as an astrologer. So at that point, I just said, I'm done with the corporate world and plunged into astrology. And I never made a better decision because I was meant to do this. I absolutely know I was meant to do this, and I'll do this till the day I pop my clogs, because it is so helpful to people, and particularly the way I'm kind of coming at it right now. I'm really trying to encourage people to go beyond the fatedness of planets do things to you, because there's still quite a bit of fear around astrology. Tell me my fortune because I'm worried about what Pluto's doing to me, or Neptune. And I want to turn that all around and say, come on, guys, this is incredible information to help you live strategically, to help you live a bigger and more magnificent life, fulfilling your Dharma. Incredible information. I think it's absolutely unparalleled. And I don't think I operate very psychically at all. I'm still reading it very much as a language, but nevertheless, it is profoundly helpful to people. I mean profoundly. It's still quite life-changing for people.
So the concept of, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is the astrology has been hijacked by woo-woo, or has translated or has transformed into that in the public mind over the last hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't know where it started. Maybe you have the answer, where there was the gypsy or the old lady in the shoe or whatever it was that was kind of making it just like, oh, Mercury is in retrograde, don't go outside, like that kind of thing. And there might be some value, there might be some truth to what I just said, but you please explain it. I'm still a little lost still with this, because all I know is I'm a Cancer, and I don't even know if that's real or not based on what you're telling me.
Well, fatherhood would be a big deal to you, I would say.
Yeah. Say that again.
Fatherhood would be a big deal to you, I would say.
In what sense? In what sense?
Well, being a parent would be a big deal to you. That would matter a lot. And it's very loving and caring and empathetic, and emotional security, financial security would be super important to you. You need to be rooted, need to feel you've got a very safe sanctuary that you can retreat from, when the world gets too much. A lot of sensitivity there, actually. But anyway, so going back to your question.
Were you just giving me a small reading based on me saying I was a Cancer?
Yeah.
Really? So all of the things you said. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. If I look at a birth chart, there are about 3,000 variables. Okay. The sun is a tiny part of it. That's why it takes me 4 to 5 hours prep. If it was just the sun, well, it would be a doddle. I wouldn't have spent, all of these decades learning and still learning.
So, all right. So the concept of being a Leo or being a Cancer, those concepts they work within the world of astrology that you are talking about, correct?
They work, but as a very small part of it. A much bit, I'd say two bigger part. And remember, there are about 3,000 variables in every birth chart, and again, the birth chart's unique. I would say that the moon, your moon, is much richer for me in information. It tells me a lot about your growing up, your childhood experiences, particularly your mother, what kind of a person your mother was, your relationship with your mother. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it challenging? In what particular way was it challenging? What has it taught you, even if it's challenging? What gifts have you brought down the matriarchal line? Your dietary habits, the kind of home you want to live in, where what your principal needs are in terms of feeling safe and secure, your instinctive reactions to life. I mean, it gives me so much and more. It gives me so much rich information. Just the moon, the sign and house it's in, and the aspects will give me all of that information. The other big thing of importance in the chart is what's called your ascendant. Now, this is determined. That's why we've got to have the exact time. And I know linear time doesn't exist, and that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But the ascendant describes the constellation on the horizon at the moment of your birth. So, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, whatever, a specific degree of that. And that the ancient peoples believed that's when the soul entered the body. But that is really the start point of the birth chart, of the clock face of the birth chart. And that acts like a lens or a filter over your entire chart. So it's how the world sees you and how you see the world. It's like a two-way filter. So so somebody, say you're a Cancer sun, so you have all of this sensitivity and the need to pull back and recharge and have a safe sanctuary and be at home with, very cozy, settled, good relationships that feel very safe and secure. You probably have a much more social ascendant, like a Leo or a Gemini. I've got to be out there in the world. I've got to be seen. I've got to interact. I've got to have all these different connections with people all over the world. It could be one of those. And you probably have some strong Aquarian influence as well, because you're very interested in the alternative and spiritual and where we're headed as a society. So your sun in Cancer is, yes, it's important, but it's still a very small part. So the moon and the ascendant are two big things. And then you've got just dozens of other things to consider to feed into the picture.
So when you say, and now again, Cancer, because I don't know many of them, but let's say Cancer is the thing. If I say the word Cancer, that gives you a very broad stroke on the person based on just that moment of that sign. Correct. Yeah. Then when you get the date, time, place, then you can start whittling down, because there's different variations of Cancers. Not all Cancers are going to be artistic and sensitive and all of the things that are associated with a Cancer. But as you start to whittle down, then you could start going in there and going, did you lose a parent on this day or this month? Did you do this, or did you move on this? That's when you can do that. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. 100%.
Okay. So then as we go through all of this, what I find fascinating about this system, this language, if you will, is that all of this information is laid out there for you. It is kind of almost a cheat code from the Matrix. It's almost a cheat code of like, okay, this soul came in here. If this soul can have someone figure this out for them, or can read the stars, their information is laid out. Like their soul plan is laid out in front of them. Now, this is where a lot of people have a problem with astrology, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. Free will versus destiny. And that's a big, big thing, because a lot of people are like, I have free will. My understanding to it is there are certain mile markers on the road that you have to go through. How you get between the mile markers is up to you, but you set up these mile markers on the other side. So you and I are not going to be astronauts in this lifetime or NBA players. We were just not set up. That would be a very interesting game. Probably a little boring because I would probably break something and I don't know. but does that make sense at all to you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. So the analogy I've used a lot is your birth chart is like your unique sheet of music. So you're given this sheet of music for this incarnation. So that's set. How you play the piece of music is down to you. So you could just bang a couple of tin spoons together, or you can play in the London Philharmonic. You can make it a magnificent piece of music. So you have great latitude of free will in how you play that piece of music. And because I've been doing this for so long, I've had the benefit of often seeing people who are born quite close in time and geography. And, one will have sort of kept the trapdoor firmly shut, and not push the envelope, as it were, in terms of really living a big life. And the other person will have lived a much bigger life and helped many more people. Now, that could also be linked to their soul contract and all that side of things. But nevertheless, that is where we have the latitude. And I'm actually going beyond that now and saying, look, I think astrology is about half the picture. It is magical to get the validation for your unique self, who you are, what your challenges and gifts are in this lifetime, your Dharma, potentially what are you meant to become, a rose or a chrysanthemum or a rhododendron, or, it gives you in much more detail than that, it gives you a pretty specific direction to go in terms of, and what you have to incorporate into that Dharma to really feel you've lived a good life. So I can be very specific about that. But then you still have so much latitude in taking this music, or taking this sheet of music, or taking this modeling clay and making it amazing. And so I want to get way beyond any sense of being limited by your birth chart, because consciousness is bigger than your birth chart. Am I making sense there?
It makes all the sense in the world. So in other words, what the birth chart tells you is essentially is the kind of clay that you're going to use. Yeah. It's going to be a very specific kind of clay, a clay that's specific to you. How you play with that clay, how you mold that clay, it truly is up to you. You could build a little mound of something, or you could actually build a cathedral out of that clay. It's truly up to you in a lifetime. So, but this is the clay that you're going to use. Like, I was born this person, this height, my height is my height. I can't really change anything about my height. Well, you can, but it would be very painful. I would rather not. But generally speaking, when you're born at a certain height, so this clay is kind of like what your height's going to be. When you're a baby, you really don't know. Nobody knows how tall you're going to be. You could end up being 6'5", coming from a family that are all 5'2". It is possible, but it all is relative. But that is the framework of this life for you. What you do with that frame, what you do with that music, what you do with that a clay, is truly up to you. And understanding where these big events or opportunities are going to be presented to you down the road is how you said earlier, optimize that ability. So if you're saying, hey, you're going to have a really big career change in about 3 years, when that comes, it would be your best interest to take it and do the best you can with this, and this aspect of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it reminds me of a client a while back, and yes, they had a very big career change coming up in 3 years' time from the corporate world, as so many of us do, and they're going to move much more into the spiritual side. But it was going to be, I could clearly see it was going to be connected to children in the third world. It was also going to, so goosebumps. It was also going to incorporate that interest in shamanism and ancient tribal cultures, ancient tribal medicines, the ancient wisdom of the earth, plant medicine, and how they could help these children. But they would have another front person, and they would be the person working behind the scenes, kind of theatre manager, making all of this happen. But they wouldn't want to be the front person. But they would be doing incredible work, working with children in dire poverty and not in good health, but using ancient wisdom to do that. And they would go on a huge learning curve about ancient medicine, shamanism, all of that side of things in order to fulfill that. So that would give you a kind of idea of the kind of information I could see for that person at that time. Now that could ignite them, something which has been, am I really interested in shamanism? That can, I'm not sure. That could really ignite what was dormant in them, to give them enough confidence to say, I'm going to do that course and see where it leads me. So I never tell people what to do. I plant seeds that could really grow into something huge in their lives, that I can see very clearly in their chart, that are potentials to come up. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So Pam, let me ask you, who or what or when did this language, this technique, this system get hijacked by the woo? When did it get this bad rep to the point where they look at you going, honey, please? I mean, I know you were fantastic in the board meeting, but you really don't believe in this stuff, do you?
It was really quite funny.
Because it's in the zeitgeist. I mean, that is when you and I think that has to do with like the daily horoscope that you read in a newspaper, and like, oh, today's cancers, don't walk out the house on today, because today's not a good day to walk out the house. That kind of that's ridiculousness. That's absolute ridiculous. It's absolute ridiculousness. But that's what's associated with astrology. So when did this happen? At what point did you see in the history of astrology it went from the shamans and the mystics to the woo?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I despair at that. And that's why I've never, ever, ever done sun sign astrology. I mean, my heart just sinks. Because also, it's not only very superficial, but it gets back to the fatedness. Don't go out today. You know, you got Mercury retrograde. I mean, I was born with Mercury retrograde. Hasn't stopped me communicating so far. You know, so and I basically ignore Mercury retrograde because I think if you have the belief system that your car's not going to start, the printer's going to jam, mail will get lost, that's what happens. That's so in terms of, if we follow recorded history, which is all we really know, 6,000 years ago, ancient Mesopotamia, it grew up through society in very academic circles. You know, the great geniuses of our time, if we look at ancient Greece, if we look at Plato, Pythagoras, they were astronomers and astrologers. The two went very much together. So it developed very much in ancient Greece, it developed all through society, and it was very much always in academia, and it was part of our university curriculum. Always that you studied astrology. It was part of the mystery schools. It was one of the foundational subjects in the mystery schools. In the Middle Ages, you couldn't be a doctor unless you understood astrology, because they were dealing with the four humors. You might remember the four humors, and if the humors were unbalanced, it meant the person was ill, and you had to rebalance the humors. They were taken from, you know, fire, earth, air, and water. That's astrological. So they had to be, so, and really all the main monarchies in Europe had astrologers to advise them. Up until the Middle Ages, the papacy had its own astrologer. So they were held in very high position, very academic, very revered. I mean, Dr. John Dee was the last great royal astrologer to Elizabeth I. He was a huge academic, mathematician, astronomer, astrologer. He was sent as an ambassador all over Europe for Queen Elizabeth I. So, you know, they were held in high regard. And then really it was the so-called Age of Enlightenment when Isaac Newton came along and said that apart from the moon, the planets couldn't exert any physical gravitational pull on the Earth, which is correct, which is true. Therefore, he said, if I can't explain this rationally, it's bunkum. And from that point on, astrology was then dismissed into back tea rooms and tea leaves and all of that kind of thing. But it started to recover really about 100 years ago, I think, with some very clever academics, yet again with Dane Rudyard. Carl Jung was a hugely prolific astrologer because he knew if he did the birth charts of his clients, that gave him a shortcut to the psyche, that gave him a shortcut to diagnosis, because he could literally see the psyche of his patients. So it took him much less time to help them. And he'd ask about their dreams because he could see what was likely to come up from the archetypes. So he kept that quiet. In fact, his whole theory of archetypes, his theory of synchronicity, that both those theories were entirely astrological, entirely. But he kept it quiet because for the same reason I kept it quiet in the business world. It blows credibility. So it was really around Isaac Newton's time, the Age of Enlightenment, when you couldn't prove the physical effect of any planet beyond the moon. And if you couldn't prove it rationally, then it must be bunkum. So I think we're moving into a very different era now. And we're just on the brink of this, which is, in fact, I just had a conversation 2 days ago, which was absolutely mind-blowing about how it may work. But certainly, I think the planets are consciousnesses in themselves. I think they have music as a consciousness. They have a tone, they have a pitch, and some people, clever people, have been able to record that tone or that pitch from the planetary orbits. And I think we have so much to discover, for lots of reasons, about energy and frequency as we move into this new age. And that's when we will really get a grip on how astrology works. But it's very much part of the quantum. It's very much part of the quantum field, that we are receiving quanta of information from the planets. It isn't a physical push-pull mechanical thing.
If you're enjoying this conversation, I invite you to go deeper down the rabbit hole with me on Next Level Soul TV. It's packed with exclusive content like live special guest Q&As, daily podcasts, commercial-free access to the entire Next Level Soul catalog, early access to episodes before they air, and special meditations you won't find anywhere else. We will be adding new exclusive content every month, plus you can connect with me during my monthly live streams. Just go to nextlevelsoul.com/subscribe and join our soulful community today. I'll see you on the inside. So let me ask you, and we're going to start walking into we've been talking about individual maps or individual charts. I'm assuming there are charts for humanity and for the earth that you also can see as far as where we are going as a society, where we're all going for that. Before we jump into that deep rabbit hole, there's this concept of the yugas. I'm assuming you're familiar with the yugas?
Yeah.
Where there's a moment, there's 24,000 year cycle, and that humanity goes through these cycles in 24,000 years. At one point, they're enlightened or much closer to source. And then as the planets and the actual galaxies are pulled away in just general orbit of source, let's say it's being pulled back away farther from the center of the universe, if you will, or the center of source, we start to get dumber. We tend to forget. We start to get angrier. We get more violent. And you can actually see that in the cycle of humanity, where we get to a point where we're so far gone. That was the Dark Ages, where nothing moved for hundreds of years, like nothing. We had no advancements, no nothing. But then as we start moving closer back, which is now going on the other end of it, we start to get enlightened again. We start to shift again. Our consciousness starts to rise. And that's where it seems to where we're going, because in the last 150 years, the advancements, not only in technology, but in consciousness is so vast. It's so vast, so fast. It seems to be speeding up daily now, almost. The advancements. And it's getting faster and faster and faster. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the 70s, things pretty much stayed the same. Yeah, now we have remote controls. Cool. 2 or 3 years later, are like, oh, look, now big color TVs are getting smaller. Okay, great. But it was very slow. Now it's like every day AI is doing something new, or we're doing this or we're doing that. So is that everything I just say, does that all make sense in your world?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And there's a very bit, not only, we moving past the end of Kali Yuga and towards the golden age, but there's so much in the cosmology as well as the astrology that says we're moving out of the old world into the new. And you're absolutely spot on, Alex. It's moving faster and faster, and it will continue to do that. It will move faster and faster and faster because the outer planets, which kind of give us the general zeitgeist of the energy we're experiencing in society, they are moving from last year to 2026, that tight band of time, out of heavy, slow earth and water signs into air and fire. And even if you're not an astrologer, you can feel water, earth, heavy, slow, into air and fire, super quick. And even by the 25th of May, I'm not sure when this will go up, the 25th of May, 2024, we're going to have another jump into speediness. AI is going to be absolutely exponential, as you know. Jupiter moves into Gemini on the 25th of May. And it's so interesting that the latest iteration from Google of AI is their latest upgrade with Gemini. Now, Jupiter is moving into Gemini, and Gemini, as you probably know, is a massive Jupiter, planet of expansion, massive data processing AI. Data processing is very much related to Gemini. I mean, it could not be more literal. So we are going to go in these huge leaps and bounds with technology. I think we need great discernment with that, and I wouldn't tell anyone what to do. They've got to make their own decisions on that. But technology, medical technology is going to be phenomenal. I think dealing with light, dealing with energy and frequency, that's going to be amazing. We're going to have anti-aging technologies, longevity technologies. We're going to be able to turn a lot of things around. We're going to be able to clean up the earth, I think, much more rapidly than we imagine. And we're going to do that with this new quality of light that's coming in for us because of the area of space that the earth is moving through currently. So, because there are two main ingredients for our evolution right now, beyond the astrology. One is, I don't know if you're aware of where peak of solar cycle 25. Mm-hmm. Okay, there are 11-year sunspot cycles that happen, all the time, 11-year sunspot cycles. We're in solar cycle 25, and everyone has a trough and a peak, and then back to a trough again. And the peak was supposed to be in 2025. The astrophysicists have had to pull it back in time pretty much to now because the number of solar flares are off the scale.
Yeah, yeah.
The magnetic shield of the Earth is thinner, more unstable. So that was like a kind of cotton wool buffer protecting the Earth from the cosmos. That's thinner and more unstable. So as the sun throws out these balls of radiation, they are more easily able to get through to us. So they are, and if I go back to 2018, we didn't have a single M-class flare. I think this year so far we've had 60. Wow. I mean, that's in the last 10.
Is that why the what are those the Northern Lights were seen in Texas?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yes. Absolutely, because it brings in new energy to the ionosphere. And the X-class flares, I think we've had something like 13 in the last 10 days. And the solar flare scale is like a Richter scale. So M-class is 10 times the strength of a C-class, X-class is 10 times the strength of an M-class, goes up like a Richter scale. So to have that many X-class flares is pretty crazy. And yes, we're at the peak of so what that does is, on the one hand, give us lots of strange physical effects like, either extreme fatigue or insomnia. We're plugged into the mains, we can't sleep, or tinnitus or aches and pains, all kinds of, because we've never experienced really in this lifetime, I think, to this degree, this high and concentrated number of solar flares. That's how it feels anyway. Maybe it's the effect of social media too. But at the same time, we are also going through a band in space called the photon belt. We only go through that every 12,000 years, give or take 500. It's very concentrated, high frequency light. Right. Yeah, like the donut. So you've got two lots of ingredients coming at once. Now, I think the reason we're feeling the solar flare so intensely is because at the same time, even though that's an 11-year cycle, we're going through this 12,000-year cycle at the same time. So these are like two very particular sets of ingredients that there's a chap on social media called Jason Estes, he calls these stem cells for the soul. They are helping to change us from carbon to crystalline. They're reactivating our DNA. They're reactivating our 24th chromosome, which Greg Braden talks a lot about, Cryon talks a lot about at the moment, which will connect us to our multidimensionality and our expanded consciousness in a way we've never known in this lifetime, or many lifetimes. So that's the cosmology of it, which is very unique. And then you come back to the astrology, where you have many outer planets changing sign, endings, beginnings, endings, beginnings, endings, beginnings. And so those are all very clear signatures for me that we are moving into a very different era, which is really exciting, actually. I mean, don't look at the old world. That's just crumbling. Don't give it any, don't give life force to anything that's dying. Just create with these amazing new energies, new light which is coming in, silver diamond light. Create, because we are doing it. We are altering the quantum wave structure to create a better future for humanity. I know we are.
So Pam,
it all makes sense.
So then the $1 million question is, this is going to be a heck of a year. It's already turning out to be a heck of a year, in many ways. We have this little election coming up in November, in the States, and actually a lot of very pivotal elections around the world at this time. Yeah. There seems to be this kind of almost perfect storm brewing. Yeah. I can see it. I mean, it's very clear. You know, right now, one of our presidential nominees are in a criminal case. And if something happens to go in that criminal case, all hell's going to break loose. I mean, there's just no question about it. Either way, it's not avoidable. It's just not avoidable. Either way, it seems like we're heading towards something pretty insane. Because I don't know why I know this or why I feel this, but I do. I see it so clearly. I'm like, I already have been telling my family, I'm telling friends, I'm like, guys, November is going to be, all hell's going to break loose. So that's what I've been seeing. So what do you say about, I don't need to know the lottery ticket numbers or anything like that. I'm not asking that, but as a general broad stroke, am I correct in what I'm feeling, 100%. What I'm saying?
100%. Really? Astrologically, 100%. Because normally if I've looked at elections in whatever country, usually I look at, Europe, UK, US, you can get a pretty good sense looking at the candidates' birth charts of what's likely to happen. I mean, Trump's win was very clear to me in 2016. He had a particular solar arc sun on his ascendant. That was clear as day, despite what the polls were saying that he was going to win. So normally I can see it fairly clearly, or with good probability, let's say. Mm-hmm. This time, all bets are off. It is incredibly volatile in the astrology. It's incredibly volatile. It's very hard to read. I don't know whether there will even be an election. If there is one, will it be contested because there's so much polarization in the US? The energy we're moving into, which is Aquarian energy, favors youth rather than old age, because both your main current candidates are old guys.
Shockingly, yes, extremely old.
Yeah.
They're both the oldest and the second oldest. They're both, I mean,
crazy.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
So yet, is this the final like death rattle for that not that generation, but for that system, these ideas? I'm not trying to say on one side or the other, on both, because it just seems so polarization. And US is not the only one that's polarized. The UK is, from my understanding, everywhere, every country is. I've never seen anything like this. When I was growing up, I mean, yeah, there were one side, left side, and the right side here in the US, but they worked together. They argued, but that was politics. Now it's just like you can't even look at each other. And it seems to getting worse, and logic is being thrown out the window. And it just seems to be getting so intense that the bubble has to pop in a big, and it's not going to be a fun way. Would you agree?
100%. And what it was so much in my head here, because the US has a very particular thing happening for it. When you were born as a country, 4th of July,
Sure.
1776, yeah,
Yeah.
we have a
Sorry about that. By the way, I didn't mean to leave the Queen in 1776, so I do apologize for my people. But go ahead. I know we were rebels. I'm sorry. It's a thing. I apologize.
No, well done, you must say, all about, because that's all coming back, the rebellion, the liberty, freedom, revolution. No, truly it is, I'm all
Yeah.
for it. So, but when you were born, as it were, with a legal constitution, 4th of July, 1776, that has its own birth chart. And that might sound crazy to say a country has a birth chart, but it's tested to destruction by astrologers over decades. And yes, that's a very reliable chart. So if I look at where the planet Pluto was, 4th of July, 1776, for the very first time since the birth of the US, because Pluto has a 248-year orbit, it is coming back to its natal place. So Pluto is about death and rebirth, okay? Death and rebirth of the US. Now, it's in the area of the chart linked to the country's values. Who are we as a country? Do we still stand for liberty and democracy and all of that? In the economy of the country, it's in Capricorn, which is linked to the politics, the constitutional framework, even the geography of who and what makes up the US. So I've been talking about this in my updates for the last 2-3 years, saying there's going to be a whole revolution, a whole transformation in the US of who are you? What's the economy going to be? What's the political system going to be? Because it probably isn't going to be the same as it is now. And are some states actually going to pull out of the US? And my strong sense was it's going to start with Texas, because that's the total solar eclipse, of 2017 and April crossed at Texas. So I've been saying for the last year or so, watch Texas, because this could begin in Texas. But it won't just be Texas, it will be other states, I believe, that potentially can pull out of the federal union. And so I see great volatility around the election. The result doesn't seem to be clear. Certainly to me, I've got to dig deeper, but to me, it doesn't seem clear. It favors youth rather than old age, but I believe the whole system is under question, and not just for the US, but for many countries. Because if I look at something else, for the world, Pluto is moving away from the end of Capricorn. It's been in Capricorn since 2008. And what it does is reveal any corruption that's not for our highest good in the archetype for that sign, okay? Now, that sign rules top-down authority. Historically, that might have been monarchies or the church, or now it's governments, okay? Governments, corporations, institutions that are top-down, rich elite people at the top telling ordinary people like you and me what to do. So inequality, elitism, and they've held the power, particularly over the last couple of decades. That is really in its death knell as a system, because Pluto it's currently just tipped into Aquarius, which is the sign of shifting the power to the people, revolution, freedom, humanitarianism, greater equality. It dips back into Capricorn, 2nd of September to the 19th of November, over your election period. How interesting is that? And that's the kind of last gasp in Capricorn for about another 240 years. So from the period 2nd of September to the 19th of November, we could feel, are we being pulled back again to the old order? But it will be louder in terms of that top-down attempted control, but it will be much more hollow, because the direction of travel from that point on, from the 19th of November, is Pluto in Aquarius for another 20 years, and then the age of Aquarius for another couple of thousand years. So that's youth, that's revolution, that's a whole different socio-political system of, grassroots up, communities, little artisan businesses getting together, enterprises. It's no longer top down. That's the direction of travel. The shift of Pluto is power. It's the shift of power from top down structures to the people. Now, it won't happen in a day, a month, a week, but over time, that is our direction of travel. That's where we're headed. Look at the French Revolution. Peasants stormed in, monarch was executed, beheaded, and France became a republic. Massive, and that's the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. Massive shift of power from rich autocratic monarchy, gold everywhere, peasants couldn't afford to buy bread, to it becoming a republic, and ordinary people having legal status. That became the foundation of democracy for Europe. So this is what we're going through again, globally, but particularly for the US because of the Pluto return in the US.
Is this why a show like this is getting the reaction that it is now and wouldn't have gotten the same reaction 10 years ago?
100%.
Really? Because I mean, I say that all the time on the show. I go, this show doesn't make sense 10 years ago. I mean, we might have had a few people listen, but we wouldn't have millions of people watching shows like this.
But this is your time. This is your time.
This is the moment of when it needed to happen. Because if the show opens up in the 80s, you might have the Fringe is watching it. Certain groups, small groups are watching it. But these concepts being talked about the way you and I are talking about it and being viewed by millions of people around the world is it just because I'm noticing, and it's not just my show. I see other shows and I'm like, wow, this is giving a place for a show like this. And not just in our field, in other fields as well, from quantum physics to other shows that are talking about things that are not in the old, but are looking towards the new. And this is only going to ramp up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. It's about truth, honesty, openness, the alternative, the meld of science and spirituality with great people like Nassim Harriman and Greg Braden and all these wonderful people. It is about people discovering their sovereignty, rediscovering their sovereignty, and saying, I know I have the power to come together with other people and co-create a better world than this. And you are a big part, Alex, of that service to humanity, to give people a platform to help them create a better world than this. And I set up this, incredibly simple idea of a 15-minute meditation on a Sunday evening. No tech, no Zoom links, no recordings. We just come together energetically. Imagine we're holding hands and connecting with our hearts. Feel love, feel joy, feel compassion, feel peace, gratitude, freedom. The visions, the experiences people are having is incredible. And I know we are changing the quantum wave structure. We are changing the future timeline for humanity. And loads of people are doing these meditations. I'm not special in doing that. But each of us are playing our part, particularly when you come together on a platform like yours or in a group. The energy is magnified as a group. You become a kind of family of frequency to really amplify the energy to say, we want a more loving world than this, a more equal world, a more caring world, a more abundant world, where animals are loved and respected. All of it.
So you were just saying that for the moment, it seems like we're pulling back just a little bit.
September to November.
This September to November, we're going to be pulling back a little bit.
It will
just
appear.
A second.
It will appear.
It will appear. It will appear. And then it's just going to go off like a rocket ship into another.
Yeah. And it will be volatile, particularly for the US. It will be volatile because, your election is so particularly polarized. But it will also bring up any corruption that is not for our highest good. It will reveal that. So it's the analogy. It's got to have, you've got to smash out the old kitchen cupboards before you can put in the new ones. An analogy I've often used is, imagine you're going to the theatre and you become aware that the whole script, the whole narrative of the play is not hanging together. People just aren't believing it anymore. So the actors are talking louder and louder and louder to kind of say, no, this is real and we're in control of this script and it's all fine. But the audience are sussing it. They're all saying, yeah, I'm not buying this anymore. I'm not buying it anymore. And eventually the scenery is starting to collapse. So I see the second half of the year as the scenery really starting to collapse and the audience saying, I'm not buying any of this. I'm leaving the theater.
So that's why traditional media, Hollywood, banks, religions, all of these institutions that have been around for so long are starting to show. I mean, I come from Hollywood, so I worked in the film industry for 30 years, and I've just seen the difference of how people are consuming it. People aren't buying the things that are coming out of Hollywood as much as they used to. They're going to alternative media sources. People don't even trust the news anymore because it's all partisan now. So they're looking at, I mean, Joe Rogan, who's got the biggest podcast in the world, much bigger than any of the news networks would kill for one episode of Joe Rogan's audience to watch their entire network for a day. It's insane. It's fascinating. You were saying that the countries have their own charts based on when they're born. Could you go back to the Roman Empire, and since it's so well historically written down what happened at certain times, could you go back and go, oh, this is when Julius Caesar showed, okay, that makes sense because of this, and oh, and this happened, have you done that as an experiment by any chance?
I haven't done it. The only thing you need, the crucial piece of information you need, is also the time. So when did the Roman Empire start? Well, was it, you can't pin down, so I need a time. But you can go back quite a long way historically, as long as you've got a time. 1776.
Yeah, 1776, or even, yeah, a lot of Europe when it was formed, there's very specific dates.
1066 for the UK, so as long as you've got a time, like signing of the Magna Carta or something, if you've got a time, then you've got a workable birth chart. If you don't have a time, you have much less information because you don't know where the clock face starts on the chart.
Right. And you can be off by years, but if you just adjust, oh, it's a 1 o'clock, not at 5 o'clock. Well, that's going to change timing a lot.
It gives me much more information once I've got an accurate birth time. So, but going back to what you just said, all of the top-down structures, religion, monarchy, banks, traditional media, Hollywood, anywhere where there is elitism and inequality over the coming months and years, the energy is leaving those structures and going to grassroots up, ordinary people, communities, collaboration, networks, local networks, global networks, farmers networks, growing food, linking information across the world, how to grow food better with electroculture or whatever it is. I'm in a group of about 200 people, and we all do something different, but we are all helping to create a more loving world. And we're constantly sharing information from other groups in the UK, other groups across the world, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel on things like healing modalities or whatever it is. More and more people across the world are coming together to buy land, to grow food, to live on, to share information and care for each other. So less and less it's about a kind of, we're moving away from this, what I call material territorialism of this is mine and this is my bank account and this is my status and my title, I'm director or CEO. Nobody cares anymore. But, what COVID did was act as a boomerang for people just desperately wanting to connect as humanity. I mean, the people in my group are all ages, all backgrounds, all status, doesn't matter. We hug, we laugh, we're all human beings. So there was a real catapult effect with COVID.
So we've talked about this year, which is going to be interesting to say the least. Where do you see all of us in 10 years, over these next 10 years? What does the charts talk about where we're going?
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, yes, a fabulous question. We start to lose vocabulary because I think we're going to become beings that we have never been before. We're going to change our state of being. There's going to be a complete metamorphosis. It isn't just going to be a gradual linear evolution for humanity. It's going to be a jump in a state of being, a total metamorphosis. So I really feel we're going to step into our light bodies in a bigger way. We're going to be less dense, literally physically. We're probably going to eat less, more plant-based, lighter foods. We're going to be have a sense of much more telepathy, stronger healing ability, living as oneness, living as a connection to source and seeing each other within one consciousness with everything in harmony, animals, nature, all of us in harmony, complete transparency, nobody can tell a lie because you can see it in their energy field straight away. And so it's very beautiful actually, and it's going to take us a few years to get there, probably, 10 years, but people are going to be popping into that at various points depending on how much light they can embody. But the big pivotal year, I think, is this year. And next year, we're going to be seeing more and more green shoots of new earth, as I call it. 2026 is a very big year of a big, big new beginning, a very big episode for humanity in 2026. And then you've got some beautiful aspects happening between Uranus and Pluto, which if you go back 300 years, that was an incredible time of creative renaissance in Europe. So I think we're going to see a lot of creativity coming in as well. I think it's, if we can just keep focusing on creating a beautiful new world, we're on the right track. Stay in love, stay in your heart, stay in kindness. If you go into fear, you're on another train track. It's a bifurcation happening right now. If you're in fear, if you're following the narrative, it's a very different future trajectory to staying in love and staying in your heart. And nobody forces you onto either one. You self-select depending on your frequency. So we can still see the other train at the moment, but as time goes on, we won't even see the train. I think we'll just forget our past. I think our past will go to dust.
So how do you explain to people what's happening now with all these wars? We've always been at war. There's always been some sort of violence or some sort of war going on since we threw the first rock. So that's not anything new. But the two big ones that are going on right now, Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Palestine, they're old fights. They're extremely old, some thousands of years old. When I saw that come up, I was just like, my first instinct, like, really? Are we still arguing about this at this point? What do the charts say about Israel and Palestine and why that's even starting now and all the damage that that's caused? I mean, it is causing, both of these wars is causing so much damage, not only into their own worlds, but it is spilling over into, other countries around Europe, around the world, in the US, are spilling. People are taking sides, again, more polarization. I would love to hear what you think about this.
Absolutely. And, broadly, I would say it isn't the people who want the wars. It's the leaders who want the wars.
Oh, yeah, of course.
As you know, because if we are in fear of all these terrible things happening, we're easier to manipulate.
Control. Mm-hmm.
So, and it is the polarization, the separation, the red, blue, Protestant, Catholic, whatever the split is, that has also been very much encouraged. So for me, and I say it often in my upgrades, as long as we, it's just unimaginably horrific what's happening to those people out there. I cannot imagine what they're going through in those war zones. But if we stay in that hamster wheel of war, death, suffering, poverty, disease, misery, we're not going to get out of the hamster wheel. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm very much a big fan of Buckminster Fuller, if you know of his work, he said, don't feed, don't even fight the old order. You go beyond and you create something so amazing. Everybody says, God, I want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of this. And you literally starve the energy from that old hamster wheel. You just starve it out because you give it no attention. Because then we really, start to use the quantum physics model. It's where you put your attention and energy that creates. Paul Levy, the Buddhist author, talks about your attention is your superhero power, because whatever you're putting on your attention on is literally food in the quantum world to activate and build, even if it's invisible right now, whatever you want to create. So if you starve out your attention on this, horrific as it is, but because it's so horrific, we can't go on doing it. We've got to create something way better, and we are completely able to do that, is by getting a lot of people, bringing humanity together, very Aquarian, to create a better world. And we're doing it quickly. And through your show, you're doing this. You're giving people a platform to speak truth and say, okay, we're going to create a new world based on these values, these principles, and that's our future. And you just starve out the attention on the old. Now, people say, well, that's incredibly careless. Well, it isn't actually. It's because of the horror that I want to create something better. Because if we go, and also if you think on a practical level, Alex, what can we practically do? Can we go and deliver aid to those areas? Well, a whole aid convoy were killed recently. It's very hard to do, to be on the ground delivering aid. Can we send money that will reliably get through to the people who need it? That's pretty dodgy too. It usually goes to the admin and the management often. So what can we do? Well, we can work energetically. That's what we can do. I mean, Lynn McTaggart is the queen of this. She has a tab called Evidence on her website with the evidence of what these meditations have actually done to stop violence in the Middle East in the past. When groups come together with clear intention and love, you can really start to change where we're headed. And that's where I'm at.
It's pretty fascinating where everything is going, and I thank you so much for saying what you say about my show. I mean, I got thrown into this show. It wasn't something I ever wanted to do. It was just it just happened to be that way. But what you're saying about starving the old, again, I have to use the analogy that I know, which is Hollywood. I've been a student of Hollywood since I was a kid in a video store. If that's how old I am, where I used to work in a video store, and I've seen the changes of how people perceive Hollywood movies, and traditional media. And the rise of YouTube from 2005, now people are like creators, even celebrities now are starting to go, wait a minute, why am I dealing with this system that is so barbaric, so toxic, so many things are going on that I can just go straight to the audience? And you're literally seeing that people are starting their shows, they're creating their own shows for YouTube or their own media platforms, podcasts, shows like that. So the attention is being taken away from traditional media, from traditional news sources, from Hollywood. Just look at the box office numbers, for God's sakes, of Hollywood. Even around the world, it just doesn't have the same energy that it did in the 90s, 80s and 90s, when I was coming up. I mean, everybody knew what movies came out that weekend and how much they made. It was a sport. That's all gone now. It's completely gone. Would you agree?
100%. And, if there are any undercurrents of toxicity happening in that world, that's the time, the dirty laundry comes out. It's Pluto and Capricorn, the last few degrees. So that's when anything which is not born of love, born of transparency, honesty, fairness, justice, this is when it's all coming out this year and ongoing, big time. And I think we're going to have some fascinating revelations as we move forwards in the next few months.
Now, Pam, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Fulfilling your Dharma with love.
And you've said Dharma a few times. For everybody who doesn't know what Dharma is, what is Dharma?
Dharma is what you are meant to become in your uniqueness. Yeah, that particular unique rose, let's say. You're blossoming into your uniqueness that you are meant to become, as I can see it in your birth chart.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Pam, what advice would you give her?
Oh, wow. Wow, wait, that's a big one. Yeah. Be brave and trust your heart. Yeah.
How do you define God or source?
That's a really interesting one. Which rabbit hole I'm down at the moment. I think it is omnipresent divine intelligence that is within all of us.
What is love?
Love is a state of being that we can all live in every moment.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
To create with love.
And what does world peace look like to you?
I think it's treating everyone as you would want to be treated yourself. Total respect for every living being, and that includes all living beings, not just
basically a hodgepodge between Buddha and Jesus, what they've said. Basically, yeah. That's exactly covered everything that both of them said in such a beautiful way, in simple way.
Yeah, I lean towards Buddha, actually. Yeah, I'm quite Buddhist,
but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world?
Bless you. Yeah, Pam, my website is pamgregory.com, and you can get a lot of information there. I've got a couple of books, training videos on there. Also, I've got a very busy YouTube channel called Pam Gregory Astrology. Astrology, not Pam Gregory Astrologer, that's the scammer. So it's Pam Gregory Astrology. And that's super busy. I put up, I don't know, 5 or 6 videos a month, and very active, lots of updates and interviews, and yeah, super busy.
Awesome. And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Yeah, just really live from your heart in every moment. You know, trust your heart and live from it in every moment with kindness, I would say.
Pam, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I have such a clear idea of astrology now. I have a clear idea of where we're all going, and I hope this conversation has helped a few people out there. So I appreciate you and everything you're doing to help awaken the planet. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and lots of love to everybody out there too. Thank you so much, Alex, for the opportunity.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.